to my colleagues. Good morning to the people of the territory. Good morning to the testifiers. I know Mr. King from being one of the individuals that did the contracts for the Home Protection Roof Program. And I do agree with what he said, that even I, who had to prepare a lot of those contracts, I went around after the hurricanes to see if those houses stood up. And I have to say I was very, very much impressed, because all the ones I showed up to, they all stood up, and I was very happy that our code was improved because the buildings stayed in place. So I know that when you start to improve the code up to standards, that it does make a difference here in the territory. Now, I don't have a problem with us improving our code and codifying what the standard is, but I am more along the lines of being concerned of actual implementation from the side of contractors, from the side of inspectors, because at the end of the day, people rely heavily on our government and rely heavily on the contractors to make sure that everything is being followed by law. And I'm just gonna use myself as an example who've gone through the process. I have dealt with one situation where I couldn't get a property after we had built it inspected because the individual had retired and nobody had, there was no replacement for them. So I literally was sitting there for 2 weeks, constantly contacting DPNR to find the inspector for plumbing, which had retired, and they had to put him back on contract until they find somebody else. So those type of things bother me. I had an issue where a gentleman who was an inspector, he kept saying I couldn't use the property for only 40% of the property because the law says if you only do X amount, and I kept saying it's not the same for commercial, because if it's zone business 1, you could use the entire size of the lot. He refused to process my permit until I went, copied the code, brought it down to DPNR, and showed it to him. So I was a little confused, because these are the inspectors that should be aware of what the law says. And I'm happy to hear that you improve the amount of inspectors, but I want to make sure that these people are going to be up to par, because, and they are up to, or they will get continued training. Explain to me a little bit about, because I just gave you 2 simple examples that hindered me that I had to try to get rectified. And with the guy for the building permit, I had to hunt him down to his house because I wanted my building passed, and that was the one thing holding me up. And we literally had to find his house to say, listen, I need this done.
So that sounds like a very unfortunate set of circumstances, Senator, but one of the ways that we are doing, one of the ways that we've been doing with our inspectors is cross-training them across multiple sectors. So you can have a building inspector also look at plumbing.
Okay.
One of the key things that we have focused on over the last 5 years, at least while I've been commissioner, is we are now preparing for our 3rd set of training for our inspectors using the International Code Council. This is where we bring the trainers down to St. Thomas and St. Croix. We actually do the training. So this is our 3rd time that we're going to be doing this now. And our goal is to get everyone ICC certified across multiple trades, so that because we do have a shortage. Like, I would like to have 10 inspectors in each district.
Okay, 10.
Because that's how much construction is taking around.
During the budget cycle this year?
So right now, we haven't had to ask the legislature for a lot of money for our building inspectors, because we do have an award from Vitima that is paying for our inspectors right now.
Excellent.
What we have had struggles with is finding inspectors, because a lot of the people that are, even when they're completing the Department of Labor construction management course and those types of things now, being on the regulatory side is not where they are. They're actually now working on construction sites. And so, it boils down to the shortage of available manpower right now.
Okay. Could I ask a final question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may, Senator.
You spoke a little bit about Office of Public Surveyor's need for it to possibly re-exist. I'll give an example. I know of a situation where there was a piece of property that was divided in two, and there was a right-of-way ran up the middle of it to make sure both of them could access either. One of the individuals built their retaining wall smack dead in the middle of the right-of-way.
Yeah.
How would situations like that be dealt with, and why are those things not picked up on prior? Because this construction is actively, party is now in a fight with these people because you're now blocking me from getting access to the property.
So as I said, Senator, if the construction is active, right, then there would have been or there should be a permit. There's no permit is going to be showing a wall through the easement, the access easement, which means that they've deviated from the permit and violated that.
Okay.
And so that's how we can make somebody remove
Take it
the
down.
structure, because you would now be in violation. We can, if you don't, you have, once we notify you of a violation, you have 14 days to correct that activity. If you fail to do so, you're issued another 14-day notice. After that, it can go, we revoke your permit. And then, but in order to fully get compliance, if it involves a structure like that, again, it doesn't give us the permission to knock it down. What it does do is we have to go to the AG's office and we have to get a court order for that.
And just quickly for that part with the AG, what happens if the AG chooses not to pursue something? Because that's a scary situation, and then all of a sudden, we're not touching this. What happens then?
Correct, Senator. So I would say that, you know, we recognize the difficulties of having to go to the AG when there's a shortage and the civil division probably only has, I think, 2 attorneys in it. So what we focus on is trying to do everything that we can administratively within our power before we have to. It is usually a situation where somebody is being so blatant and so non-compliant that you have to involve the AG's office. And at that point, the AG's office actually does work with. We currently have a case in St. Croix that Amanda's been working on. Again, somebody that's just being blatantly non-compliant,
Okay.
and we're now in court with the individual.
Okay, thank you for your answers, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the additional time.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis. Senator Diane Capehart, Vice Chair, you're recognized for your...
To testifier Krieger or Peterson. For example, if you have a historic location where the building has been demolished, is it plausible that someone can put up say, a concrete building and put a wood facade around it? So it will still look, but it's a concrete building, the structure of it. But in order to meet your requirements, you know, the bill would, because, you know, some people feel a little bit safer in a hurricane, you know, because of the hurricanes. They build a concrete house, but they put the wood around it. Is that something you guys would allow?
Yes, Senator, you can put up a concrete building. You don't have to put wood around it. What you will be required to do is that the fenestration, the order of how the windows are aligned, the doors, the shape of the roof, that's where the committee's guidelines will guide you. But you can build a masonry building out of cement blocks, concrete plaster. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heidegger. Senator Donna Fred Gregory, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon once again to my colleagues, to the people of the territory, to the testifier. Mr. Peterson, I happen to agree with you 100%. I think as a government, we also have to do our part, because if you're making all these rules and regulations for the general public to follow, we should be following them as well. Now, I wanted to ask a question quickly in regards to, for example, Mr. Commissioner Oriel left. I wanted to know what was the balance of the other money that's not being distributed. How is that being spent? Because initially he said it was like 6 million out of the 10 would be distributed. Then he said about 7 million. So I wanted to know how was the other $4 or $3 million going to be utilized. But if that's something we could request of his office, or are you aware? If you could share with us.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Senator Francis. So the territory, we were awarded $10 million. Out of that $10 million, there were 2 direct award projects.
Okay.
One we went to Government House. It was like $1,005,000. $1,005,000 went for our DPNR building to
Okay.
be restored. And then the rest of it was administered for the grant program. And we also had administrative costs out of that, which was about $2 million and change, because we have staff.
Okay.
We had to hire a separate staff to administer the program.
Okay.
So that gives us roughly about $6 million and change, where it's going directly for reimbursements and repair projects.
Other projects. Okay. Thank you for that clarity, because I like to know where our dollars are going. I wanted to ask in regards to this 2% that he was touching on in regards to direct assistance for historical projects, et cetera. And it's tied to the Casino Commission, but I'm trying to understand, how could we really be generating money from that if we still only have, I think, 1 casino?
Yes.
So how do you think the law needs to be amended so that more monies could go directly into that fund, maybe a different source, maybe tapping into allowing casinos where the tourists actually are? I'm trying to understand it, because to create a law to say that this is to help fund something, but you don't really have anything tied to it to generate those funds, it's almost like a moot situation. You may answer, Mr. Krieger.
Thank you, Senator Heidegger. I appreciate your question. So the wisdom of this body in establishing the historic districts saw to it that it was not only for the preservation of our built heritage, but also our tourism product. And so I believe that the tourism funding that goes to tourism should also go to help administer this loan program, because it's part of our tourism product. It's part of our economy. And we're promoting heritage, right? We're inviting people to come here and experience what makes the Virgin Islands special. That's part of tourism, and it ties in directly with the historic preservation program.
I love that idea. Yeah, but we had the OMB director here the other day, and she basically told us it was because she said we have $60-something million on paper, but apparently it's not really there. So I love the idea, because it is part of our tourism product, but apparently they have to figure out how to actually put the money in the bank. I wanted to ask you one other question quickly. And this is just to speak to your power, authority, and understanding. Because if you say something and somebody doesn't follow it, and I'm going to be frank with you, a couple years ago I was about to buy a piece of property, and I was so terrorized, like frightened, to purchase it, because I was concerned about being in a historic district, because the stories I've heard over the years, like, you're going to be tortured if you even try to build anything. So I was very, very, like, apprehensive, and I wrote a letter to Historic Preservation saying, listen, you tell me for a fact I am not in your district. And I got a letter back saying that that parcel that I did end up purchasing was in the clear. It was a funny situation because I had historic to the left of me, to the right of me, to the back of me, but that little area was not touched. So thank Jesus. But the point I'm gonna ask, I understand our need for preservation because we don't want, I'm proud to have born in the Virgin Islands. One of the reasons people say, well, oh, she don't leave. I love being from the Caribbean.
Amen.
I love waking up and seeing the ocean. I love seeing some of our structures, and I love that about us. So I understand the need for the preservation, but I also understand the need for balance as well. And in order to get to that point, I understand what my colleague is doing, but I do agree that it does need some major tweaking to this legislation, because even as myself was reading through it, I'm sitting here wondering, well, what does relaxed mean? Relaxed leaves a very open door with no real structure that could be interpreted by anyone, and it might cause issues. And I see what he's intending to do by saying he wants it relaxed, but I think the bill itself has to have definitive structure and collaboration. So,
Time.
Mr. Chair, could I just finish up quickly?
You may wrap up, Senator.
I appreciate it. So I'm trying to understand a little bit about power, because if somebody is building something and you guys step in and say, hey, you can't do this, or you can't put up this structure the way it is, you have to follow the rules and what are the ramifications if things are not followed? Do you guys have authority to issue fees? I know DPNR can do certain things, but what do you guys have the capability of doing?
Thank you, Senator. First, let me say I'm very sorry that you had the fare of investing in a historic district. We are available to provide guidance and counseling to anyone who wants to invest in our district to alleviate and dispel those rumors, myths, lies, and concerns. The commission is guided by enforcement powers under the code, and so if violations are identified through a process of first notification of violation, if that is not acted upon, then they have the process of going through applying fines, which is administered through the Department of Justice. That's one route. Also, if it's a business, the commission has the authority to work with DLCA to have a show cause hearing that will address a revocation of a business license if the business fails to comply with an order. That's two routes. Because of the complexity in it, they don't necessarily get to doing that, but that's part of it.
So I'll toss out something. That I Love St. Thomas sign out there. Explain to me what's the procedure with that, because I heard some back and forth with it, so I need to know, because I'm curious as to know what the final outcome and what will be the resolution to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that additional time.
Thank you, Senator.
Do I proceed, Senator?
Yes, you may.
Oh, okay. So to answer your question, Senator Heigler, the I Love St. Thomas sign, the process was to be that an application was filed. When an application was filed, the problem was that it was installed prior to the application being heard.
No, the application was sent afterwards.
Oh, it was okay. So I stand corrected. So the item went in, an application was submitted for it to be heard, but it was a delayed submittal, so it was referred to the next month.
I guess
Thank
also
you.
for the record, two violations.
Of the sign, but I do understand your guys' need in regards to following rules, regulations, and procedures. And if you said 2 violations did occur and they said they're going to move it, is this a temporary thing while they go through the process and get actual approval to do it? Or is this a done deal? Because that's something, for me as a senator, even speaking with the constituency, I didn't fully understand what was happening with that.
Thank you,
so
Senator.
much.
Thank you very much. I don't know if a response is warranted? Are you
I would
interested
have to
in-
yield to the chairman on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're going to move it.
Okay. And your concern, Mr. Peterson, the primary concern.
While I listen to the conversation here today, I have a friend that lives in Barbados. And one of the things that their government did was like a public-private partnership where they were concerned about the abandoned and derelict properties, and they assisted with grants as well as loans to the private owners to build out the integrity and the structure of the building while they allowed them to deal with the inside on their own. Because the goal for them was also beautification of their location, but also to make sure to upgrade some of the derelict and abandoned properties. I have been working diligently for almost a year on an abandoned and derelict properties piece of legislation. And one of the things that keeps coming up has to do with funding. And as much as I have been working to try to create a correlation between public, private, government, et cetera, that's something that we're looking at various different states and seeing how they worked it out. There's another abandoned and derelict properties bill that was submitted by the administration, but it seeks to remove our government buildings from the process. And for me, that is a major problem, because if we're really going to tackle abandoned and derelict properties in our territory, our government owns quite a significant amount of these properties, and they need to be addressed as well. So with mine, I do plan on include government properties in there. But do you think that we need to have some kind of demarcation because we happen to be the owners as well as the ones creating the laws? Or do you think there should be a holistic approach across the board to tackle this major issue that we've been discussing here today in regards to abandoned, derelict properties and how they affect the community as a whole?
Thank you for your point of inquiry. Is that directed to a specific person
Mr.
from the
Krieger
panel?
or
Mr. Krieger?
Peterson can answer.
Well, holistic is always best, because as was pointed out before, it helps to set a good example. I know the government as a whole, we do have plans for a lot of our buildings. It's just that, because of funding is primarily a challenge. A lot of times the plans on the books just haven't been able to be implemented. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you. Colleagues, this is we're gonna have 2 more points of information. I know